Hello and welcome to this broadcast by Brexit Watch. I'm your host, Jonathan Saxty. Today we are delighted to welcome back the Tory grandee, Sir John Redwood, to Brexit Watch. Sir John, real pleasure to have you back with us today.
Pleasure to be with you and your audience. I'm looking forward to Brexit. Really can't wait. We've had to wait far too long.
Hopefully not too long to go now. Now, Sir John, before we go into Brexit, obviously the country, or certainly England, has been plunged into a second national lockdown. This is due to end at the beginning of next month. I know you've been a critic of this government on this front. Tell me, what do you think the implications are, certainly economically and perhaps politically, of the second lockdown and the current coronavirus strategy?
It is more damage for our economy. It won't be nearly as damaging as last time round because it isn't as tough, and many more businesses will be able to carry on. But there will be businesses damaged by it. Some are not allowed to open. Some have to operate with social distancing rules, which makes it much more difficult for them to operate at decent volume with any kind of profit. And we still have an understandable aversion to travel and tourism, which is damaging for all those businesses. So I and others have been saying, let us take the virus seriously. For a limited number of people, it is a very grave disease which can result in death. Let us do all we can to find treatments. Let us do all we can to make our hospitals and health settings very safe. Let us do all we can to support people who are at risk so that they can live more safely and have proper support in their homes without contacts with those who might spread the disease to them. Let us do all those things and let us get as much normal life back together as possible for people who are free of the disease or people who are not at much risk from the disease.
John, where do you think we are going to be in 6 months' time?
Well, I hope we're going to be through a lot of this. I mean, it is good news that we're on the threshold of a vaccine that works. It still needs to pass tests, very crucial that it's subjected to very stiff safety tests because we don't want them to roll out a vaccine that could have unforeseen consequences. So let us hope it gets through stiff safety tests, and let's hope other vaccines follow. And as more people volunteer for the vaccine, I think quite a lot of people will volunteer for it. So you build up a much larger number of people in the country who can't get it and won't be able to pass it on, we trust, if the vaccine works well. And that should allow us to reduce the controls and allow a much more normal life. So I'm hoping in 6 months' time that will be working. I hope there'll be more and better treatments so that many more people will survive the disease. And it does look as if there's a bit of a seasonal factor in this as well. And as we get back to longer days and more sunshine and more ultraviolet light and more outdoor life, we trust that the virus will recede properly again.
John, I know you're a small government Conservative. Are you concerned that the Conservative Party has vacated the political space of limited government and indeed civil liberties?
Well, I believe in government doing a limited number of things really well, and I do believe in government intervening to help those who can't go to work and earn their own living. I do believe in a decent welfare system. I do believe in making medicine and medical treatment available to all those who need it without them having to pay at the point of use. Those are all good things, so that's quite a bit of government. Of course, we've resiled a long way from good Conservative philosophy and principles that government should limit what it does because you can't afford it to do everything, and if it does too many things it can make mistakes or get in the way. But I think there's a good reason for it. There was an unknown and dangerous pandemic. The public did want the government to take a lead in fighting the pandemic, and I can understand why they put us through the first lockdown, to give the health service time to catch up, to give medics and scientists time to research it so that we had more treatments and possible vaccines. That's understandable, but we must now have a plan for getting out of all that. We need to move on because you can't afford to go on with a state this expensive and this big indefinitely, and you can't afford to perpetuate the damage for the private sector, which the actions obviously cause. So I'm urging the government to make sensible relaxations for the private sector to get on with things and to make a sensible retreat from those areas where it shouldn't in the long term be involved.
John, you mentioned the private sector. How does the UK now go for growth, and how does it grow itself out of the sort of financial black hole it finds itself in? What if you were in Boris Johnson's position? What would your policies be for the next few years?
Well, I would be full of optimism, and I would want to make quite a lot of changes to say to people, it is now all about growth. Are we borrowing too much? You bet we're borrowing too much. We cannot solve that by putting people's taxes up or by cutting spending clumsily. We can only solve it by getting the country back to work and generating more value added, by having more things that people want to buy made in British factories, growing more food here that people want to eat, and providing more services that people want to buy. And I think Brexit is a huge opportunity. You see, I want out of the single market. I think the single market has been exceptionally damaging to the United Kingdom. It's been skewed. It produced a set of rules which helped German car makers and French food producers, but didn't help British service providers. And so we've run this massive balance of payments deficit for years and years with the EU because of the rules of the single market. So I say to the Prime Minister and others, out of the single market, let's grow much more of our own food by having an agricultural policy that supports British farmers producing the food that at the moment comes from the Netherlands or Spain or France or wherever. Let's catch more of our own fish and process fish in Britain because they are our fish and they were stolen from us by the common fishery policy. And let us produce more of our own cars for our domestic market because we don't sell many of the cars produced here to British people. So let's encourage our industry to have popular models here that are made in British factories that are sold to British people. And then it's a win-win. And to do that, you need tax cuts. To do that, you may need a different approach to state aid to get things going. To do that, you want intelligent procurement by the British state. British state spends billions, but under EU rules, a lot of those billions went to imports. Well, let's have rules which produce competitive British bids to supply the British state. You know, I don't see the German government running around in British cars. So can't we have the British government running around in British built cars throughout all its manifestations?
John, you've segued nicely there into Brexit, which is what I want to talk about now. Now, the internal market bill, which is designed to correct some of the more pernicious aspects of the withdrawal agreement, the Northern Irish Protocol, that has been rejected by the House of Lords. It's been essentially, it's now gone back to the Commons. What do you think the implications of that are, and also the implications of a Commons vote now being delayed until the end of the month at the earliest, we're told? Is that a cause for concern?
Well, I hope not. I presume the government will want to reassert its bill because it's very essential to our future and to the success of Brexit itself. I'm deeply disappointed but not surprised by the House of Lords. I mean, throughout the Brexit process, ever since the British people made their very wise and good decision, the House of Lords, by big majority, has been out to thwart us, undermine it, dilute it, prevent it, delay it. And once again, they're on the side of the European Union against the side of British Brexit voters who want out of the single market and want to get on with the freedoms that brings. And I don't for one moment think that what Parliament is proposing to do by Commons vote breaks international law. And if you look at the treaty we actually implemented, and what matters is what our statute says the treaty says, we put in a sovereignty clause quite deliberately. I wouldn't have voted for the thing without a sovereignty clause. The sovereignty clause was an override clause, and it was there to say to the European Union, if you don't sort out all these issues with us in the way promised in the negotiation period that followed the withdrawal agreement and is pending the possible future agreement, then we are a sovereign country and we have the right to sort out our own arrangements in the way that we see fit. So I actually want more changes than the current internal market bill is proposing, because I wish to assert more of our freedoms if there is no overall agreement with the European Union.
Do you think the withdrawal agreement should actually be repudiated then?
No, I'm not talking about repudiating it. I'm saying that we make our own decisions on the matters that are essential to the assertion of our sovereignty and the exercise of our freedoms under Brexit. And I think in a way the European Union has repudiated or gone against the principles of the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, which was a parallel important statement of the two parties at the same time, because the political declaration said we know that in the withdrawal agreement, a whole lot of issues haven't been settled. We're going to have a negotiating period to settle them. But by the way, we can tell you now what the settlement is roughly going to look like. It's going to centre around a free trade agreement. That will be the core of the relationship. The UK has tabled free trade agreements for their approval or amendment, and until recently, they refused to talk about them at all. That was bad faith. So the UK now has to look after itself and exercise its sovereignty as Parliament enacted, Lords as well as Commons, in the EU Withdrawal Act.
John, it would be remiss of me not to talk about recent developments, both on the other side of the pond and here. I'll start with the other side of the pond. It looks certainly it's been announced pretty widely that Joe Biden has won the US presidential election. I believe I'm correct in saying there's not been an official declaration. Apologies for getting that wrong, but I think I'm correct. But it's certainly widely said. He's been congratulated by world leaders, including the Prime Minister. It's been widely reported that Joe Biden is not particularly a big fan of Brexit. He's apparently voiced opinions, voiced concerns about the internal market bill and the impact on the Good Friday Agreement. Do you think these concerns about a President Biden in the White House rather than a President Trump are well-founded, given that the UK will be wanting to strike a trade deal with the US in the coming months?
Well, a lot of people will be President Biden, and he's won the popular vote by a decent margin on the votes announced so far, but you're quite right, he is not yet president-elect. There are recounts underway, certainly a recount in Georgia. There are votes still to be counted in some states, and there are a series of law cases, and we haven't seen how much they amount to yet, but a series of law cases and challenges to the published results in some states. And so, as a foreigner to the United States of America, I wish them well in getting to the right answer under their democratic system, and it's very important we don't prejudge anything. They will go through their processes. But if, as you say, and as most people say, it is going to be President Biden, then of course he has a different approach to the European Union and particularly to the Republic of Ireland from that pursued by President Trump. And I think it's very good news that we read in the press that our Prime Minister was the second world leader after Canada that he called, and that they had a very warm conversation. And as you would expect, they found a lot they do agree about. Britain is a great ally of America through NATO and our common defense, and we have always played by the rules and paid our share of the bills, and that is a warm part of the relationship, and that Britain will be a strong voice for free trade worldwide, which is something which I'm sure President Biden would welcome, and that Britain has often been backing America in issues in the Middle East and the development of peace around the world and so forth. So I think there were plenty of areas of common ground, and it was by all accounts, as we read, a warm conversation. But let's be in no doubt that President-to-be, Mr. Biden, is very clear that he's proud of his Irish links, and he often takes the view of the Republic of Ireland and of the European Union, because the two, Republic and European Union, have been as one on this issue of Brexit, so there will be some differences. But the Prime Minister was in a strong position to be able to say to him, there is no way the UK is going to resile from or disrupt the Good Friday Agreement. Indeed, the UK government has always been crystal clear that they don't wish to impose new physical barriers on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. There is no need to, because there will be a common travel area allowing free movement of people across the border once we have fully left the single market on the 1st of January, and that we don't need a new set of restrictions on trade, that even if there are tariffs, for example, because there isn't a free trade agreement. Currently, there are excise duty differences, there are VAT differences, there's a currency difference. You don't need border posts to sort out the excise or the VAT. You don't have someone sitting in the lorry shelling out £20 notes to pay the extra VAT. It's all done electronically by computers away from the border, and the same will be true of tariffs. So I trust the Prime Minister started the process of reassurance, because Mr. Biden doesn't want to feel the Good Friday Agreement is under any kind of pressure.
Sticking with the border on the island of Ireland, John, As you understand it, is there any sort of infrastructure that will be required if indeed we have a so-called no deal or no trade deal Brexit? Will there be some sort of infrastructure required there that isn't there currently?
No, I don't think there will be need for physical additional infrastructure at the border. A lot of these trade arrangements at the moment, because of the need to adjust currencies, excise, VAT, and product specifications, take place electronically. People enter the details of the consignment they're going to be sending, and that is known in advance when the truck reaches the border, and things are worked out by a computer and away from the border. And I think that will remain true, even if you need to add tariffs to excise, and even if you need to allow for some differences in specification as and when UK rules deviate from European rules on products.
John, I said recent goings on both on the other side of the pond and here. So coming back here, obviously in the last day or so, we've heard that the Downing Street Director of Communications, Mr. Kane, has resigned. He was is a close ally of the Prime Minister's chief advisor, Dominic Cummings. We now hear that Dominic Cummings, another prominent Brexiteer, is going to be resigning or going to be leaving Downing Street at the end of the year. Are there any implications of this? Is there anything we should read into it in terms of perhaps the sort of the vote leave squad, if you like, leaving, vacating the scene at Downing Street? Is this a cause for concern for Brexiteers?
Well, I hope it's not. I mean, I think the Prime Minister should have the advisors he wants, and he has to sort out who he chooses to have in Downing Street, and it's no point having an advisor he doesn't want to work with. I trust what it means is that the vote leave team feel that by the end of the year it will be job done on the main cause of their life, because I hope we will have this clean exit and that we will know that before the 1st of January. It would be good to know as soon as possible. And vote leave can then leave saying, well, didn't we do well? Because we helped the Prime Minister to win an election when the British Parliament, in its previous guise, was doing everything to thwart the will of the British people. So in effect, Brexit had to win twice. It had to win the referendum and it had to win the 2019 election. And then I hope they will see through a clean Brexit of the kind that you and I and many of your audience want. And they leave on a high. And they may then have other things to go and do. And the Prime Minister will then want advisors for fighting back from COVID-19 and for the economic recovery, which wasn't the same, perhaps, set of skills and interests as the Brexit team have.
John, I think that's a good point on which to end. So thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Very good.